The final phase of a river is its plain stage. This is when it gets very close to the sea. All the gradients around the river are very gentle. Even the slope that the river is flowing down will often be less than 1 degree. This means it's very difficult for the river to get straight to the sea. It ends up having huge, wide loops called meanders. This river frequently floods. Its flooding on this broad open valley covers the land surface with alluvium. Alluvium is the very finest material of clays and silts. Because there's a lot of deposition going on here, the river channel quickly fills up, and so flooding is more prevalent. Changes of course are more prevalent. But the alluvium is a godsend to the farmers. Here you can see these tight packed fields are a system of arable farming, probably growing crops like wheat, rapeseed, oats, barley on a rotational system. Although rotational systems are largely going out of fashion these days through heavy use of fertilizers. There are no steep slopes on this at all. So it's a very, very broad open valley with the river having to swing in huge loops. Let's put the rest of the loop in there. We'll put the shape of the riverbed in there. Once again, it's this offset V shape. The valley floor itself is covered with alluvium from the frequent floodings, because this is a river that's going to flow over its banks many times. To try and prevent it flowing over its banks, embankments are built. In the United States of America, they're called levees. This zone here, from here to here, is the floodplain. It's not an advisable place to put your buildings or even your transport routes. And on these slopes here, on the valley sides, they're putting their houses, they're putting their roads and railways, so we'll have the railway symbol in there.
So stood on the end of Spurn Point. It's where the land of Yorkshire starts, but it's the exit of the Yorkshire River systems. To my right is the mouth of the Humber, and the Humber is the exit of the draining of the Firth of England. We stood here looking at the habitats of Spurn, which are much and varied. It's not all about the wet side. There's the terrestrial with the sea buckthorn, which is a designated species. The site itself has a SSSI status. It forms part of the Humber estuary, which is an SPA, which is a special area of conservation in SAC, and a Ramsar site for the birds. But it's very, very varied location, and there's lots of interest and lots of designations, as I say, upon the place. Obviously this part of the river is tidal. You know, we are connected to the sea. This is where the Yorkshire River system starts or finishes, depending on your perspective. But the tidal range at Spurn is up to 7 metres. The tidal height changes daily. It also changes with the cycle of the moon. We're now on a rising tide, what we're currently looking at, and we can see this change in water surface structure. There's an inshore that's very calm. Now that may be brought about by wind, and then we see a much more ripply surface, and then beyond the boat within it. That, in actual fact, is brought about by a change in depth. On that ripply edge is the start of the sandbank called the Binks. You can see it on lots of OS maps, and it curls round from the point and curls round going north along that edge as you look on the picture. That is a deposition moraine, and from the point of view of the longshore drift, as the material's carried down and it all goes from north to south, the energy is lost as it comes round the corner of the peninsula, and it deposits the fines, the finer materials, out in that location. So it's this constant changing seaward aspect of Spurn which affects the river aspect and again the land. It's constant change, not just monthly, weekly, but daily with the tide, and that again in turn is affected by the winds. One strange thing for here, the greatest threat of wind from on this site is a northwesterly. You would think it was easterly from the North Sea. That's not the case. A northwesterly above Scotland, swinging round to a northerly, pushes the water into the North Sea. It causes a tidal surge. It can't get out. It causes much bigger waves, much greater energy, and that is what has the most visual, damaging, erosive effect on the peninsula. Now we say damaging because we see change, but what it's doing is really coastal process. One of the differences with Spurn to the headwaters of where the Yorkshire River system starts is its amount of rainfall we get here. Definitely less than 400 millimetres of rain a year, which makes it one of the driest places in Britain, probably the second driest, with the driest being somewhere in the Brecklands in East Anglia, and our wetter areas up in Argyll and up that way. But up on the fells and the moors, we're looking at, I think, almost 2,000 millimetres of rain a year. So you can see that contrast, but we end up with it all here after it's left the highlands of Yorkshire.